The farmers turned up at what should have been a meet and greet and a nice announcement at a housing development, and they honked their horns and he had to scarper.
So we can see on our screen some of these tractors that popped up just outside Milton Keynes.
Keir Starmer ran away like a coward as the farmers cornered him, demanding answers.
Oh, now you've got a very big farm, and you even own a mountain.
I don't own a mountain.
No, your National Trust does. All right, it's on your land. The National Trust.
We have mountain rights, and this is where people look at farmers and they look at us as asset rich. But we're not profitable.
But the point is, the single biggest farm.
Starmer and his cronies are so out of touch that they don't even understand the real consequences of their actions.
It's hundreds of farmers with perhaps the largest flotilla of tractors to ever descend upon Westminster. They're coming to Parliament to hear this debate. 150,000 people signed a petition, and now the politicians are forced to hear these arguments in favour of keeping the family farm tax regime as it is.
The farmers have been betrayed by this idiotic and malicious government, but they're pushing back.
Keir Starmer had to evacuate by helicopter a visit to a housing development. Of course, today is all about housing for the government. It's all about these new towns that are going to be building up and down the country, apparently, although we don't yet know exactly where. I don't believe these new towns are going to appear or how much they're going to cost. But anyway, the farmers turned up at what should have been a meet and greet and a nice announcement at a housing development, and they honked their horns and he had to scarper.
In the latest move that left the entire world laughing, stupid Starmer ran away from the farmers like a rat.
But just on Keir Starmer having to essentially evacuate a housing development visit because farmers turned up with their protest and their tractors, I mean, can Keir Starmer continue to ignore this issue?
I don't think he's ignoring it at all. Look, it's a fantastic...
Well, he didn't speak to them, did he?
It's a fantastic reality about democracy. The
Labour ministers are stuttering and struggling to do damage control, but they're failing miserably.
We are a country that allows for peaceful protests to go on really important issues. Obviously, I'm excited to talk about new towns, but it's right that we've got the people feel that they're able to demonstrate. And
there's no limit to hypocrisy and manipulation with these people as they continue to ignore the farmers' demands.
Keir Starmer was meant to talk to journalists here, and unfortunately he's not had that interview on the site because he had to leave because of the protests, and so perhaps we're not getting some of the answers that we might have done had Keir Starmer been able to speak to journalists at this event. Do you think he should have spoken to the farmers and then perhaps he would have been able to continue looking around this housing development and we could have got some answers? But because he ran away, we didn't get those answers.
Starmer is getting anxious as he is refusing to answer the difficult questions and making himself look like a fool.
Well, I know the government has been speaking to farmers for months over their concerns. Today was about and is about our plan for new towns, and it's really important that the government has been able to put forward some new details today. There's much more to come, though, and you'll know that this is something that's going to be looked at as part of the spending review in terms of the funding commitments.
Labour's mouthpieces are lying with a straight face, and the farmers later exposed the truth.
I was at I was reporting from the Whitehall protest where the hundreds of tractors appeared on Monday, and there were a lot of Conservatives, a lot of Reform. I didn't see one Labour MP, I don't think. Not really talking to the protesters.
I know that my colleagues, particularly those in rural communities, have been meeting with farmers in their constituency, have been, engaging really closely with them.
The Tories and the Reform Party are standing up for the working class farmers, but Labour's shamelessly betraying them.
And our commitments to making sure that we support food security in the UK. There are lots of issues that we need to be working with farmers on, and I know that the government is keen to listen and engage, including on areas where there is perhaps less agreement, because that's what a responsible government does.
Starmer's gang doesn't understand a thing about food security, which is why they're clobbering the farmers.
Peter, how much is it going to all cost us, though, all these new towns? Is it the taxpayer that's going to have to pay for all these towns? Because, I mean, the population increase is probably one of the reasons why we need all these new towns, because immigration's been so high. So how much is it going to cost us?
Well, building new towns is a sure way to get growth.
Instead of supporting the farmers, Starmer and his lot of incompetent idiots are shoveling money at the illegal immigrants. There's a hidden socialist agenda that's leading Starmer to make such shady moves behind the scenes, and that's exactly why he's so scared to face the farmers and answer the public's burning question. Labour knows that there's no justification for their lunatic inheritance tax hike policy, and now they're trying to avoid the consequences. Naturally, the public is outraged over this, and the farmers are especially furious.
We've been covering the big farming protest, which is going to happen in Westminster today. This campaign against inheritance tax continues.
Yes, the changes, which are due to come into effect in April next year, means that farms worth more than £1 million will be hit with a 20% inheritance tax.
A few months ago, Labour introduced their shambolic policy that unfairly targeted the farmers and proved just how out of touch with reality Starmer and Rachel Reeves are. The increase in inheritance tax was perhaps one of the biggest and most stupid blunders Labour did. However, the farmers have not given up and are demanding accountability from this government. On top of all that, they're bashing Starmer as hard as they can and humiliating him on live TV. Starmer has no clue about the long-term consequences of this disastrous increase in inheritance tax.
Keir Starmer went to the NFU and promised how he was going to protect family farms before the election. And then he comes out with the first budget with an absolute bombshell for the farming communities. And if people think that these farmers want to be in London today, think again.
You've things to do.
We want to be home, tending to our animals, and making sure that we can feed you people in these big cities with affordable, healthy, nutritious food.
The public feels betrayed because they have every right to do so. Starmer made a dozen grand promises at the very least, and then he went ahead and broke all of them. Not only did he mislead the public, he downright manipulated them to win over support and later hang them out to dry. The farmers especially were completely caught by surprise, and that is exactly why they're protesting with such intensity. This sudden and disgraceful war against farmers is directly threatening our food security and future. Really, the numbers are damning.
Distance yourself from the right. Don't let this become a Tory thing. Start talking to MPs. Now, a lot of things in this. I mean, if a couple can pass on 3 million, no death duties for 10 years. You just said your father, at a decent age, God bless him, hasn't passed it on. Well, I don't know who would advise, with all respect. I mean, I've got much more modest my little savings. I'm thinking now, how do I make sure that my children get that in a sensible way?
Labour is still on their high horse of self-righteousness, and it just proves what delusional lunatics they are. Instead of listening and understanding the grievances of the farmers, they have the audacity to turn this into a political issue and blame it on the Tories. Just how stupid is Starmer to be demanding the already furious farmers that they should mind their tones? The truth of the matter is that the farmers are trying to talk to Labour ministers, but all of them are running away like rats. Even Starmer doesn't have the courage to face the farmers.
We just want a conversation with government, with the Treasury. Why aren't they having that conversation? We haven't heard anything. They've just locked that door in number 11. It's nobody wants to listen to what we're trying to tell them. Our job, honestly, it's on its knees, okay? We're out 7 days a week making sure we can produce food. The profits in our industry is awful. Suicide rate, mental health.
They're refusing to have a conversation because they know that they're wrong. Every time Starmer gets cornered like this, he runs away from accountability or ends up making a massive fool out of himself. There's a very clear reason why Starmer's approval ratings are in the gutter, and they seem to be only going lower. On top of all that, the farmers are being denied their fundamental right to demand answers. Starmer and his Labour Party are not above anyone, and they won't get away with doing whatever they want to the country.
We have to pay our mite of inheritance tax to provide for the army, the police, the roads.
How much of the country, what percentage of the country pay inheritance tax, do you know?
What percentage?
Yeah.
As small as possible.
4%.
Yeah, And I'm sure if
This
you
is gonna
arrange
hit every single farmer
it will not,
that's got a farm over £1 million. £1 million is nothing today. It's nothing.
Oh, I see. Gosh.
No, it isn't.
All right,
Because it's working capital.
All right.
Every single Liberal argument falls apart when you take a closer look at it. The humble farmer shredded the Labour supporter for his nonsense argument. Yes, we all must pay taxes, but what happens with that taxpayer money? It is blown away on illegal immigrants and useless projects that this socialist government is so fond of. The truth of the matter is that no matter how much the government tries to downplay the situation, a huge number of farmers will be disproportionately affected by this policy. What's worse is that they'll be forced to sell off their farms to pay the inheritance tax.
Well, you've got a very big farm, and you even own a mountain.
No, I don't own a mountain.
The National Trust does. All right, it's on your land. The National Trust.
We have mountain rights, and this is where people look at farmers and they look at us as asset rich. But we're not profitable.
But the point is...
The biggest problem with Starmer and his Labour Party is that they have a hidden agenda behind everything that they do. Socialists like Starmer hate the wealthy, and they're wrongfully assuming that the farmers are rich. Sure, the farmers have a lot of assets in terms of land, but that doesn't really make them rich. The farming industry is notorious for having very low profits, horrible working conditions, and little to no benefits. The humble farmers of Britain are the backbone of our food supply, and under Labour, that has been demolished in the worst of ways. Is it then any wonder that Starmer is disgracefully running away from them?
That is the ingenious horns on various tractors, because there was a farmers' protest going on in the vicinity, and when they found out that Keir Starmer was about to open a new building site or whatnot, cut a piece of cloth, plant a tree, wear a high-vis jacket and look like a moron, they thought, how about we go and give him a visit? And so they played that sort of psychedelic 60s soundtrack in the background.
The entire country is against Starmer at this point, calling him a moron and whatnot. What's worse is that they're not even wrong. Starmer is so incredibly tone-deaf that while the farmers were protesting in outrage, he was going around the country cutting ribbons for his ineffective house-building projects. In Starmer's mind, the farmers can suffer all they want and he still won't care to listen to them. On the other hand, the houses that he's building, most of them will end up belonging to illegal immigrants anyway. Starmer and Labour's priorities are clear. What kind of a Prime Minister won't even listen to his nation's complaints?
Did he take time to listen to their concerns? Well, shall we have a little look?
I don't know. Absolute shambles. If you're in there, just talk to us. Talk to us.
There we go. That is the horns, the farmers' horns, all going off there. And Sir Keir Starmer, where is he?
At this point, people are genuinely questioning how bright Sir Keir Starmer really is. He was given a golden opportunity to clear up any misunderstandings with the farmers and show that he cares for them, but what did he do instead? With every passing day, Starmer is becoming a national embarrassment for Britain. His actions really makes you wonder if he has some sort of superiority complex and thinks himself above the rest of us.
No, the Prime Minister decided to be bundled into the back of the car and driven back to Downing Street, still wearing his high-vis jacket. And to make things even more farcical, to show how moronic the man is, he was seen getting out the car in Downing Street at the other end of the motorway, still wearing that high-vis jacket. I mean, you'd think at some point someone might be like, mate, why don't you take the jacket off now?
Starmer got scared and made a run for it with his tail between his legs. That is exactly how a guilty person behaves. Of course, the scene that he caused just made him look like an utter moronic fool who just can't stop making all the wrong decisions. Make no mistake, the farmers are peacefully protesting and demanding to have their voices heard. It's Labour that's trying to mislead everyone with their continuous lies and deflections.
And then you get the one Labour man stand up for 4 minutes and basically repeat everything that we've already heard, somehow thinking that repeating and repeating and repeating is somehow going to make it right. You know, the facts are still wrong, and he is still lying.
But they do lie. I mean, what they changed their tune yet on when it comes to inheritance tax? They said, well, you know, only a small scattering of farms are going to be affected. Barely any, nothing to see here.
Starmer and his gang can't seem to wrap their heads around a simple fact. Continuously repeating the same dishonest excuses won't magically turn them into truths. Nobody's buying their idiotic explanations, and the farmers have already announced the next huge step in their protest. Really, Starmer better be afraid of what the farmers are planning to do. Labour underestimated just how important the farmers are, and their single policy of increasing the inheritance tax will cause them to lose everything.
What I don't understand is this government seems to think, well, if you've got all this farmland, 300 acres worth all that money, you're rolling in it, you're practically a millionaire. But the point is, you're being punished, penalised, simply for handing your farm down to your kids to farm. It's not like there are people all over the country ready to don a pair of wellies, drive a tractor and start, toiling in the fields. It very often is very much kept within the family because that is how it's passed down generationally. The skills, the love, the knowledge, maintaining as well the wonderful British pastoral traditions of farming, not this sort of intensive rearing we're seeing in America and in Central Europe.
To say that our farmers are irreplaceable would be an understatement. Nobody wants to work in extreme conditions for little to no profit, yet our farmers continue to provide us with quality food supplies. They're not rich by any means, as there's a huge difference between having a lot of assets and having liquid wealth. Starmer has picked the wrong fight against the farmers, and he'll soon realise the huge consequences.
That before the outbreak of the Second World War, we were producing about 60% of what we ate in the UK ourselves. The other 40% largely was being imported. We're about that level now, and actually the attack on farming that we're seeing coming from this government, without doubt, that is going to drop.
Ruining the economy, killing growth, and betraying justice wasn't enough for Starmer. He's now trying to get rid of our food security as well. People are wondering if this man is dense, genuinely stupid, or just downright malicious. Relying on foreign imports for food is as horrible as things can get. Really, it means that the prices will go up, everything will be of a lesser quality, and the quantity will be much limited too. The Labour Party has somehow managed to make things as bad as they were during the World War in terms of food supply, and they're only gonna make it worse. Thankfully, the farmers are fed up and they're announcing huge moves. A closer look at the details revealed that this isn't just some small dispute, it's the future of our nation at stake.
Now, family farmers have had a tough time of it recently. Of course, the costs of farming have risen with the costs of importing grain, the costs of getting that fuel for all sorts of farming machinery, and of course, new impositions for climate measures too. 10% of farms in this country may well be put towards net zero measures.
Labour's been attacking farmers for a while now. Ever since Rachel Reeves's nightmare budget, we've seen a relentless assault on the most vulnerable working class Brits. First, it was the pensioners, and then they're clobbering the farmers. All the while, the cost of living and farming has been steadily increasing to make matters worse.
It's a concerning time for the family farming businesses. It's a concerning time for those generations of farmers who, for generation after generation after generation, have not just produced food for this country, but also looked after the land that they farm. They know that if they sold off their land, they could probably cash in, make a lot more money. They know that they could sell up and move on and perhaps have a more lucrative life. But they farm because farming means more than money.
The key difference between the farmers and Starmer is that the farmers are not ready to betray this nation. Ask yourself, what reason do they have to continue working in harsh conditions with little to no benefit, especially since they can make so much more money by simply selling the land off? The answer is simple, they're patriots unlike Starmer. These farmers have the British public as a priority, but sadly, the Labour Party isn't giving them the same treatment that they deserve.
The new Labour government got elected back in June. There have been concerns that farmers, far from being at the forefront of their thoughts, have been lower than low, down the bottom of the list. The new farming minister doesn't represent a rural seat, he represents a city. The agricultural secretary represents Croydon in London, not a farm in sight.
It's almost as if Starmer and his cronies couldn't care less about the plight of the farmers. Labour ministers are constantly ignoring their requests, but enough is enough. The farmers have not decided to force Starmer and his incompetent government to listen to their concerns. Labour is out of touch with the electorate and they're in for a harsh reality check.
Why the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, in her budget, decided that for the first time, family farms should be subjected to pernicious levels of inheritance tax. Inheritance tax that might be survivable for other sorts of business that have liquid assets, but for businesses like farms that have material assets that are perhaps asset rich but cash poor, well, that sort of inheritance tax levy placed on these farms could be devastating.
Rachel Reeves proved with her budget that she doesn't have the slightest clue on how to run an economy. Anyone with a shred of common sense can figure out that the farmers do not have the kind of cash to be paying these insane amounts of taxes in any way, shape, or form. So, ask yourself, what is Starmer trying to achieve? Everything seems to point towards a secret agenda.
But why then should the Treasury be coming in and trying to grab it? Why then should there be this change to how this land has been managed? And could this be a bit of subterfuge? Could this simply be the fact that the government doesn't view our farms as efficient enough?
Labour's sudden U-turn on every single promise that they made is incredibly suspicious. Were they lying from the start, or is this all a part of the socialist dystopia Starmer is trying to create? First, they betrayed the pensioners with the winter fuel allowance, then the countless tax raids, and now this lunacy. The nation has had enough of this idiotic government, and they're standing up against them in the most firm way possible.
Yes, hundreds of farmers with perhaps the largest flotilla of tractors to ever descend upon Westminster. They're coming to Parliament to hear this debate. 150,000 people signed a petition, and now the politicians are forced to hear these arguments in favour of keeping the family farm tax regime as it is.
The farmers' protest is just the beginning, and they have no intention of stopping till Starmer is held accountable for his ridiculous and incredibly dangerous plans for Britain. Make no mistake, their efforts are working, as the farmers have already forced Parliament to reconsider this nonsense with their petition and march against Labour's tyranny. Now, that is a noble goal, and one that you can help out with by liking the video and subscribing to the channel.